here's some fresh sign. This track's big and printed deep. Maybe it's that big buck I've been scouting. I got a funny feeling he's close. I better check and make sure. There's some deer. Man, I'm sure glad I listened to my instincts. I doubt that big buck's with them, though. Enough of this. I'm gonna find that sucker. He's gotta be close. There's that track again. Man, it looks like a big one. Whoa, there's a bald eagle. Finally, a buck. Oh, there's two of them. But I don't see that big boy with him. He's probably just inside the trees. I'm gonna circle around and find out. He's gotta be close. The sign's just too fresh. There he is. Nope, that isn't him. Boy, he sure made my heart jump, though. Where is that son of a gun? It's getting late and I don't have much time left. Well, I'm gonna get up on this ridge and take a look around. Man, it sure is pretty up here. Well, I think you won again today. Wait, what's that? Why, that dirty old bugger. He looks bigger than I remember. Man, he's a monster. Darn it, I don't think I can reach him tonight. Whoop, that settles it. I'm staying out. I'm too close to turn back now. Man, he is one heck of a buck. As far as I'm concerned, he's the papa daddy of the woods. I better find a place to hole up for the night. I'm sure glad I brought my survival pack. Otherwise, this could be one terribly uncomfortable night. I'll see you in the morning.
You know, many hunters and outdoorsmen have found themselves in similar situations. Now, you know, being hot on the trail, they may lose track of time and maybe become momentarily disoriented. That's just a big word for lost. Or you may just want to stay right out there with the game and improve your chances of scoring. Now, whatever the reason may be, many times the coming of night, you know, compounded by rain, snow, or freezing temperatures, can be a life-threatening situation. Now, we hear of people every year that become lost and panic and die in the wilderness. But the purpose of this tape is not to frighten a person out of enjoying a hunting or outdoor experience. On the contrary, I want to give you the skills and confidence that you need to have a safe and enjoyable trip. You know, attitude is the most important part involved in making it through any survival situation. Now, no matter how much you know about wilderness survival, it won't do you any good at all if you don't have the proper attitude. Now, developing the proper attitude starts way before the actual survival situation is staring you in the face. Now, it's developed in your everyday life, you know, at work, at home, and it requires practice. Now, in my business as an outfitter, I have the opportunity to work closely with people from all walks of life. Now, one thing that I've noticed, that an encounter with bad weather really brings out either the worst in people or the best. But in a survival situation, your life may depend on the best in you, your inner strength, and most people are much stronger than they realize. A big part of developing a good positive attitude is determining what would be nice to have and what is really needed. Now, you can sit against a tree like this, and freeze to death wishing for a bedroll. Or you can get up, scout around, and find something, do something about it. You know, or you can fume and fret over every little thing that happens at work, or you can change what you can and put up with the rest. Now, the attitude that you develop under everyday stressful situations may determine whether or not you panic under survival conditions. You know, this reminds me of a story about a hunter that got lost in a place we call Granite Meadow. Now, we'd had him up there and we had all the directions on how to find our way back to camp, and we told him all this before he left, you know. Stay put if you get lost, the whole works. But he got up there and it got a little bit late and he got to wandering around and he got disoriented again. So we went out to try to find him, and he was shooting his gun, signaling to us, and we'd signal back at him. We'd go to where he was, and by the time we'd get there, he'd signal off in another area. So we'd go there, and by the time we got there, well, son of a gun to be someplace else. Now this, we just kept going in circles. We weren't doing any good at all because he was panicked, and every time he'd hear us, he'd try to come to us. He should have just stayed where he was, and we could have found him. Well, this went on for quite a while. Finally, we said, hey, you know, we're getting tired of this. So we just built us a bonfire, and we sit there and waited and waited. He was still running around, and then finally, pretty late, about 3 o'clock in the morning, we heard him fire one shot. And that's all he had, and I figured, well, he's probably running out of bullets. So we didn't answer back because we knew he'd try to come to us, and we'd miss him again in the dark. So we went ahead and headed to the direction we thought the sound came from. And we worked in there, and we finally found him. And he was in what we call this Granite Meadow, and he's right in the middle of it on a knoll. There's a bunch of rocks in there, and he had his back up against a big old rock, and he had him a little fire going. And we rode up on him, and that was a happy son of a gun to see us. And when I rode up there to talk to him, I says, you know, what the heck are you doing here, and how come you got one bullet left? Because he said he had one bullet left. He says, well, you know, I was trying to find you guys all night, and you guys kept moving, and I couldn't find you. And he says, and so I stopped here, and he says, and then the coyotes, they started coming after me and howling, and he says, I didn't know what to do. He says, I thought, man, should I shoot the coyotes or should I shoot myself before they eat me? So this son of a gun was really shook up. Now, if he'd have followed the advice, just stayed put, built him a fire where he was at, we could have found him, or he could have spent the night there and came out in the morning. So this is a good example. Don't panic. Don't run around. Stay put and think it through calmly. Practice having a positive attitude. Mentally put yourself in a problem situation and tell yourself what you're going to do. Now, program yourself with the thought that no matter what happens, there's something you can do. Now, when you're in the woods, stop and look around you. Notice your surroundings. Think up imaginary situations and decide what you'd do about each problem. Now, if you really do this, you'll probably react to a real crisis exactly the way you have programmed yourself to do. Now, knowing how to survive with nothing is great. And as we go through my survival series, we'll learn how to do that. However, for most people who only occasionally visit the woods, the best advice that I can give at this beginning stage is to take advantage of modern technology and go prepared. Now, a survival kit can be as simple or as elaborate as you want. I usually pack only what I really need. Now, here's a list of the items that I'd recommend that most hunters and outdoorsmen pack with them on a day outing to be prepared.
Water purification tablets, matches in a waterproof container, candle, compass, lighter, fire starter tablets, whistle, flashlight, high energy food like dried fruit, jerky, protein bars, candy, granola. The Mountain Rat pack saw. And of course, G.I. Joe paper. A space blanket, first aid kit, marker ribbon, a flask of water, trash bags and flexible tubing, cordage, and the topo map. You can also carry a spare pair of socks, a soft cloth, or an extra bandana. Now, you need to have either a knife on your belt or in your pack. Oops, I almost forgot the collapsible cup. I usually pack a piece of this nylon parachute material. You'll see how I use it later on. Now, if you want to pack shelter material with you, you can tie on a lightweight tarp or a piece of visqueen. With the parachute and a tarp, my fanny pack weighs almost 6 pounds. That's not much, and it's sure worth it to be able to spend a comfortable night. You can also tie on an extra sweater, jacket, or shirt for added warmth as the temperature drops. I have often been asked what type of clothing to wear while hunting in the Colorado Rockies. Now, I consider the loose-fitting layer method to be the most practical and the warmest. Now, I start with polypropylene long john. Now, polypropylene is very warm and it wicks the perspiration away from your body. I prefer wool pants because they are quiet, stocky, and the wool is warm even when it's wet. Of course, for warmer weather, I wear lighter chamois pants too. On my legs, I wear custom stockers. They're quiet and they're very warm, waterproof, and they keep snow and mud out of the boots. For boots, I wear Thinsulate Pro-Line boots. These boots are warm, light, and easy to walk and stalk in. They have very flexible soles. Buy your boots a little loose and your feet will stay warmer. Then I put on a chamois, flannel, or wool shirt. Again, they're quiet and warm. Next, according to the temperature, I layer on a wool sweater, jacket, and my sheepskin vest. I wear a bandana to keep the cold off my neck, and it works great to pull up over your face in a real cold, windy condition. If it was real rainy or wet, I would add waterproof outerwear. I also wear a good pair of gloves, waterproof if it's wet, and then a hat. Now, 75% of your body heat escapes through your head, so keep it covered. Now we're ready to go out in the woods. So let's go over a few preventive measures, to keep from getting lost. Now, when you leave camp, take note of your direction of travel by taking a compass reading. If you do this often during the day, you'll be able to keep a general idea of what direction you've gone. I've noticed that it's real easy for my hunters to completely reverse their directions. A compass is especially useful, in an area that you aren't familiar with. Also, always notice your surroundings, the lay of the land. Stop often and pick out landmarks, especially behind you. Now watch for saddles, peaks, rocks, ridges, anything that's unusual in formation, and look in all directions. Most hunters know what the country looks like ahead of them, but many don't take a careful look to see what it looks like going the other way. Now this is important. You got to notice your back trail because this is the direction you will be returning. Now a common problem occurs when a couple of people go out together. Often each is dependent on the other to keep track of where they are going. Now this is especially true with youngsters. Then when they split up to hunt, one or both can end up lost. The coming of night changes how everything looks. The landmarks that you've picked out have disappeared. Now if you roam around in the dark, you may end up in a different canyon or someplace like that, and come morning you won't recognize anything that's around you. So stay put. A topo map is really useful to help you keep track of where you are. The contour lines show ridges, peaks, canyons, etc. Now once you learn to read one, it's like looking at a picture. You can then go into any area and find your way around just by referring to the topo map. It's much like using a road map. Now, let's return to Colt. He's the hunter who, being hot on the trail of a monster muley, has decided to spend the night out. Finding a good shelter spot is uppermost in Colt's mind. Now, he wants to get a good night's sleep so he'll be ready to hunt at the first hint of light. To do that, he needs to be both comfortable and warm. So Colt looks around and assesses the building materials that are available. Now, there is certainly no shortage of firewood in this area. Colt finds a well-protected niche under a group of spruces. Under wide spreading branches lies a soft mat of needles. Well, it's time to go to work. From his survival pack, Colt takes his pack saw and quickly puts it together. There's a lot of muscle saver in this little package. Colt will build his shelter with the door facing to the east. Now this way, the back of the shelter and the trees will take the brunt of any incoming storm. He clears out the area for his bed and a small fire. Then he gathers armloads of spruce boughs and lays them in a thick layer for his bed. If you've never slept on a springy bough bed, you're missing out. Colt now chooses, cuts, and cleans a center pole, and two shorter poles form the framework for his shelter. Now, there is no way to tell you an exact measurement to cut your poles. Each shelter situation is different. However, make sure the center pole is longer than you are tall, and the support pole should be placed about 2 to 3 feet from the ground, depending on how big you are. Now, keep it small. You'll have less airspace to warm up. This particular method doesn't use any cordage to secure the supports. Now Colt will lay up a framework on both sides of the shelter to support the insulating material. Make it sturdy and try to use as much deadwood as possible so as not to destroy live vegetation. The framework is then covered with spruce boughs, laying them in layers to repel rain or snow. Grass, leaves, and other materials can also be used. When you're collecting the boughs, don't strip a tree. Take only a few boughs off each tree. Now this way you won't harm or deform them. Make your insulating layer thick, around 3 feet. Colt lines his fire pit with large rocks to help reflect the heat back into his shelter. Having a fire starter will make starting fires easier, but don't let this give you a false sense of security. You can burn up a lot of fire starter without ending up with a fire if you don't have the proper tinder. Some good tinder is pitchwood from burned or lightning-struck trees. Look around. You can usually find dead, dry sticks on trees down low on the lee side, away from the incoming storms. If the stick breaks with a sharp snap, it should be dry. Dry leaves are good tinder too. In wet weather, leaves and twigs dry out much faster when they're up off the ground. Now this is aspen bark. Its fibrous content makes it a top tinder, and it ignites very easily. Cedar bark also works extremely well. You can rub it together to make a fine tinder. The friction will also dry it if it's damp. Well, it looks like Colt's got his fire going. Now it's time to just sit back and relax and enjoy a fine outdoor experience. One thing to remember here is that if you don't have any water, don't eat. Eating and digestion uses up body fluid. Now I'll cover more about how to obtain water later on in my survival series. Yeah, it's a great feeling, being able to just stop wherever you are and spend a comfortable, even warm night. Well, it's time for Colt to hit the hay. He has built a nice little shelter with plenty of insulation. By wrapping up in a space blanket, or in this case a lightweight poncho that he's brought along, Colt should be able to spend a cozy night. The last thing he does is cover the entrance with spruce boughs that he's collected for this reason. Inside he pushes more boughs up against the door plug to make sure the door is plenty thick. I bet I know what Colt will be dreaming about tonight. That could be a good way to take an icy bath, which in cold weather conditions would not be a good idea. Many people die every year from exposure or hypothermia. Hypothermia occurs when the body temperature drops. The best treatment is to warm up as soon as possible. Now, building a shelter generates a lot of body heat. There are many kinds of shelters to build, just as many as a person can dream up. They all have a few factors in common, though. The first is choosing a good spot. I like to build a shelter in a place that takes as much advantage as possible of all Mother Nature's good works. Now, old Mother Nature, she can be nasty, but she's provided everything that we need to survive if we only know how to use it. This particular spot under wide-spreading spruces is out of the weather. There's considerably less snow on the ground here than out in the meadow areas. For my shelter, I cut a long center pole and secured one end of it to a tree with cordage. The other end is supported by two poles, tied together to form a cross. Next, I clear the snow and the debris out of my bed area using the pack saw as a rake. Then I dig a bed pit in the ground. Now this is where I plan to bury hot rocks, little mini heat generators. I covered the bed and framework with visqueen. That's a shelter material that I packed with me. Now this gives me a temporary and quick shelter to store gear under, and it keeps my bed area from getting any wetter. The log at the back of my shelter provides a natural windbreak. I clear out the area in front of my shelter for my fire pit, lining it with rocks, which I will use for my bed, and setting up a fire reflector to reflect the heat back into my shelter. There are many types of reflectors that you can use. Natural reflectors can be big rocks or logs, or you can build your own with a pile of rocks or firewood. Wet wood can be used in your reflectors and then burned later when it's dry. Uh-oh, better stop for a little first aid. I just tried to chop off my little finger. Besides a first aid kit, I always wrap duct tape around my bow. You never know when it'll come in handy. Now to get my fire built. Here are a few more tinder items you can add to your list. You can carve a wet stick down to the dry wood, then carve off the shavings. And my favorite is pine gum or sap right off the tree. Now this stuff really burns. I've collected some damp spruce boughs and laid them up along the back of my reflector to dry for use in my bed. Also, I turn the rocks around my fire periodically to heat them thoroughly. This usually takes at least an hour or more, so I use the waiting time to finish weighing down my shelter with forest debris, and then to warm up with a good hot cup of herb tea. I just dropped a small hot rock into my cup of water. The tea bag is on the bottom of the cup, covered by my bandana. Once the water is hot enough, lift out the bandana, and this will remove the rocks and any ashes that you've collected. Then stir and enjoy. When my big rocks are heated, I place them in my bed area, then cover them with about 4 inches of dirt. Then a thick layer of spruce boughs. You can use hot rocks in any type of shelter to increase the warmth. Ah, that feels great. Now we need to wait about 20 minutes for the rocks to cook the moisture out of the ground. Otherwise, I'll end up with a lot of condensation under the tarp. So while we're waiting, I'll eat a little snack and dry out a bit, and you can watch some more examples of shelters. Some of you probably think finding a good shelter spot in this snow will be tough, but it's not as hard as you think. Snow actually is a very good insulating material. I've dug a trench in the snow and put up my framework with a center pole tied to the east side of a tree. I then fill the trench with spruce boughs to sleep on and under. Always get more than you think that you'll need. I then make a mat of spruce boughs, thoroughly covering the framework, thick enough to support a layer of snow. My pack saw will make a good shovel. This little saw can be used for lots of things, just like my parachute material. Covering the shelter with snow will make it a lot warmer, but don't work too fast. If you work up a sweat and get chilled, you'll be a good candidate for hypothermia. So the best bet is to work steady and slow. Time for bed. I wrap up in a piece of my parachute and then get in the shelter. I really like this parachute. It's light, strong, and extremely warm. Check your local Army surplus for this amazing nylon material. I cover the entrance with spruce boughs, backfilling with a thick wall of boughs from inside. Now a big trash bag hung up inside the door also helps stop the heat from escaping. Some of you are probably wondering, why should you go through all this trouble to build a shelter? It seems that it would be easier to just build a good fire and sit by it all night. Now anyone who's tried this will tell you that it's a miserable night. Ron here did just that, spent the night out by a fire. He wore himself out keeping the fire going, and he figured he must have burned a whole tree. Ron informed me that he'd never do that again. He'd rather take the time to build a shelter and then get a good night's sleep. I asked Ron how he felt about his ordeal, and this was his reply.
This is how I felt, folks. Burnt on one side, froze on the other. The night I stayed out.
Ron's got it figured out now. This night out will be much different. Ron's packed a small tarp with him. He's going to put up a simple but effective lean-to. He stakes out the back corners of the tarp, then secures the tarp to poles to hold up the front. This type of shelter really works well for wet weather, and it's easy and quick to put up. Here's another good tinder, dry pine needles. Now when you build your fire, start with your tinder and then build a little teepee out of small sticks. Then gradually add larger and larger sticks until you have a good fire. Now Ron has built his fire just barely under the edge of the tarp. This protects it from any rain or snow, and it still puts out good heat with the tarp as a reflector while letting the smoke escape. In rainy weather, you can rig a clothesline under the tarp to dry out wet clothing. Mr. Ron really misses his wife when he's out in the hills, so he's going to construct a warm body to sleep next to. First go the hot rocks, then a layer of green boughs. Ron has collected a large pile of pine needles, tree boughs, and leaves to sleep in, right next to his heat generator. Smokey the Bear would be proud of you, Ron. He pulls the upright poles in to put them within reach from his bed. Then he wraps up in parachute or his space blanket and pulls down one side of the tarp. Now he pulls the extra insulation over and around himself. He'll spend a cozy night. The rocks will generate heat under the tarp, and the pine boughs he has around himself will keep any condensation from the tarp from getting on him. Hot rocks are not needed if you use more insulation around yourself. Ron is going to show us finding and using a natural shelter. This could be a little cave, under a ledge of stable rock, a hollow log, or a friendly cedar tree like this one. First, Ron sets up a framework around the bottom of the tree. This will support a mat of insulating material to form a solid windbreak. Now he just snuggles in among the insulation. He has a good 2.5 foot thickness around him. He has put a plastic trash sack around his shoulders to work as a body heat retainer. Now trash sacks work great for rainwear too. Now Ron has learned fast. The wilderness has become a friend instead of an enemy.
Well, folks, I guarantee you ain't gonna feel like no hot dog tonight.
Well, folks, that's some of the other shelters that you can build. When you're in the woods, just stop and look around. See what kind of shelters you can dream up. I'm ready to hit the sack now. My hot rock bed should give off heat for at least 7 to 8 and up to 12 hours. I'm going to get some good sleep while I can. I let the cross pieces down to make my heating space smaller. spruce boughs pulled up and around me will keep me from getting wet from condensation on the plastic. Well, good night.
Rock-a-bye, baby, in the treetop. Well, folks, it's about time to wrap it up. But there's a few things that I want to go over and re-emphasize because I think they're important. Now, number one is, whenever you go out hunting or hiking, always give someone an idea of where you're going and whether or not you're prepared to spend the night if necessary. This will save a lot of trouble and a lot of heartache. Now, number two, also make it a habit to take your survival pack with you everywhere that you go, even if it's in your car or truck. Because, you never know whether you're going to run off the road or run into a storm or whatever. So always be prepared. And also remember that when you're in a survival situation or lost, pick a spot, build your fire, shelter, whatever, and stay there. Even if it's until morning or until someone finds you. Now, by trying to find your way out in the dark, you can get yourself in a lot worse predicament. Now, as far as shelters go, I've covered a few. But the thing you need to remember is that there are several types of shelters, and you just need to look around you, see what the conditions are, and then make the best of it. Now, another thing we want to cover is re-emphasize hypothermia. Now, this one will get you. Always be prepared when you go out so that you can keep yourself warm, and always do everything 100% in a survival situation. Now, this is the best thing that you can do is do everything 100%. And last but not least, don't forget the most important ingredient for survival, and that's attitude. If you ever give up, you've lost the whole battle. Now, I hope the tips that we've covered on wilderness survival have been helpful to you. Now, I know that if you really practice, you too can feel as one with the forest. And then you'll be ready for the next step in our survival series. Now, as a help, because, a lot of you are just learning this survival stuff. As a help, I've got a little book out that's called the Mountain Rat Hunting and Survival Guide. Now, this is a little pocket book that'll fit in your shirt. Now, if you get this and pack it around with you, if you run into any of these situations while you're still trying to learn, it'll have step-by-step directions on how to build your shelter, your fires, and some general first aid practices, plus many hunting tips on hunting elk and deer. So I think this will be a big help to you. Now, we've had fun trying to help you out on this, and we hope you've learned something. And until next time, good hunting.
Now, following are a few products that we've field tested ourselves, and we've found them the best that money can buy. Now, this is the Durango saw. Now, it's great for many uses: hunting, camping, firewood, ranch, home, and for game processing too. Now, it has a beveled center arm that stops binding when quartering big game animals. It also has pin connectors and a twist-tight nylon band that provides constant tension. Now, this stops wear and tear on the joint assembly. Now, it has easy assembly with no tools, and it's easy to pack. Now, I'm telling you straight, this is the best saw that money can buy. It's guaranteed to outcut any saw on the market today. That's right, any saw on the market today of its size. Now try it, the Durango saw. The Rancho Rio Bonito sits approximately 100 miles west of San Antonio and Austin, Texas. The headquarters for this 15,000-acre ranch is the 70-year-old Spanish hacienda, which is made from the native limestone. The lodge overlooks the mile-long spring-fed lake, which is home to unbelievable populations of black and Guadalupe bass, as well as brim and catfish. Come join us for a relaxing vacation and savor the scenic beauty of this exciting ranch. Along with the extraordinary fishing and photographic opportunities, this ranch has a very impressive population of trophy white-tailed deer. Through quality control, the average mature buck will score 10 points. Your bigger bucks can be found in the oak thickets and cedar forests, and in the designated horseback hunting only area. For those of you looking for exciting new hunting adventures, the Rio Bonito has a fantastic selection of exotic game. All of these animals are free-ranging with no game fences restricting their movement. For the big game hunter looking for something exciting and different, we have the Japanese and Manchurian Sika deer, the axis deer, and the fallow deer. The ranch also holds a superior population of trophy aoudad or Barbary sheep, mouflon, and Corsican rams, as well as other exotic species. To round out the hunting excitement, each hunter can enjoy pursuing the many flocks of wild turkey. Top that with a stalk on a wild hog, and your Texas hunting adventure will give you the memories of the good times and the friends you've made along the way. Come join us at the Rancho Rio Bonito. For information, write or call our toll-free number. We're looking forward to hearing from you.